It all happened so fast. Nobody even saw it coming. The boy was just standing there, backpack slung over one shoulder, hands shoved deep into his hoodie, earphones in. The morning sun glinted off the cracked sidewalk as he waited, shifting from foot to foot like any other teenager killing time. Then the sirens came. 2 squad cars screeched to a halt on the curb, doors flying open, uniformed officers charging toward him like he was public enemy number 1. Before he could even pull out his earphones, one had him by the arm. Another was already patting him down, barking questions he didn't have time to answer. A crowd began to form. Someone pulled out a phone. But nobody said a word to help him. Nobody asked what he was doing there. Nobody even asked who he was. The boy's eyes darted from face to face, wide and frightened, but nobody met his gaze. Not one person stepped forward. What would you have done? Be honest. If you saw a kid getting dragged away on the sidewalk, would you have stepped in? Or would you have stayed quiet? Tell me in the comments below. I really want to know how you feel about this. The officer holding him snapped a pair of handcuffs around his wrists, ignoring his protests. You fit the description, one of them said gruffly, pushing him toward the squad car. But I didn't, the boy tried to say, but they cut him off. You can explain downtown, another officer growled. The boy's backpack hit the ground, spilling papers, a half-eaten sandwich, and a crumpled math homework assignment across the pavement. Nobody moved to pick them up. Somewhere in the back of the crowd, a woman's voice finally cut through the murmurs. Excuse me. It wasn't loud, but it stopped everyone cold. The officers froze mid-step. The boy stopped struggling. Even the crowd parted slightly as she stepped forward, heels clicking sharply against the sidewalk, a tailored coat wrapped tight around her shoulders, her eyes blazing. The mother. And she didn't look scared. She looked furious. The crowd instinctively stepped back as she walked closer, her heels striking the concrete like a metronome. The boy's head snapped up when he saw her. His chest rose with a quick, shaky breath. Not just relief, but something else. Oh. Excuse me, she repeated louder now. The officer holding the boy's arm stiffened but didn't let go. He glanced over his shoulder at her and gave her a quick, dismissive shake of the head. Ma'am, stay back. This doesn't concern you, he barked. But she didn't stop. She walked right up to them, her eyes locked on his. You will let my son go, she said, her voice low and even. The other officer finally looked up from rifling through the boy's backpack, a faint smirk on his lips. And who exactly are you? Her eyes narrowed. I'm the woman who's about to end your career if you don't take your hands off my child. That made him pause. The first officer frowned and finally muttered, And just what makes you think? But she was already reaching into her coat pocket, pulling out a badge. Not a police badge. Something shinier. More intimidating. Federal. The crowd gasped. Even the boy blinked, stunned. The badge gleamed in the sunlight as she held it up between 2 fingers, her voice calm but ice-cold. Agent Monroe. Department of Justice. And this young man happens to be a protected witness in an active federal investigation. The color drained from the officer's face. The one holding the boy's backpack nearly dropped it. The crowd erupted into whispers, phones still raised but now catching a very different scene. The boy stared at her, his mouth falling open slightly. He'd known his mother was strong. But this was something else entirely. The lead officer stammered. We didn't know, ma'am. We were told a suspect. You were told wrong, she snapped. And then quieter. And if you'd bothered to ask a single question, you wouldn't have just assaulted a minor in front of a dozen witnesses with cameras. She held his gaze for a long, excruciating beat before adding, Now, take off the cuffs. The officer swallowed hard, then fumbled with the key until the boy's wrists were free. Studio microphone, have you ever seen someone completely underestimated and then turn the tables like this? How did it feel to watch? Comment below. I want to hear what you think about what just happened here. The mother gently rubbed her son's wrist where the cuffs had been. Then she turned back to the officers and said flatly, We'll be in touch. The boy bent down to pick up his papers and backpack, but one of the bystanders beat him to it, silently handing the homework and sandwich back to him. For the first time all morning, the boy smiled faintly. and the mother, with one arm protectively around his shoulders, guided him through the parted crowd, leaving behind two very humbled officers who couldn't even bring themselves to look up. By the time they reached the car, the boy still hadn't said a word. His mother opened the passenger door, helped him inside, and set his backpack on his lap. Only then did she crouch down beside him, her eyes softening just slightly. "You okay?" she asked gently. He stared down at his hands, flexing his fingers where the cuffs had left red marks. Then he nodded. Just once. She reached over and tucked a stray lock of hair behind his ear, her expression unreadable. "You did nothing wrong," she told him. "Don't you dare let anyone make you feel like you did." The boy finally looked up at her. His lip trembled just a little, but he didn't cry. Not now. Not in front of her. As she stood and slid into the driver's seat, she glanced in the rear-view mirror. The crowd had already dispersed, but the two officers still stood there, watching, one of them rubbing his neck, the other speaking low into a radio, probably trying to figure out just how badly they'd messed up. Her jaw tightened. It wasn't over. Not yet. When they got home, she made him a sandwich and set it down on the kitchen table before picking up her phone. The boy sat quietly at the table, nibbling at the bread, watching as she scrolled through her contacts and finally pressed one. "Monroe here," she said when the line connected, her tone clipped and professional again. On the other end, a voice responded faintly. She didn't let him hear the words. But she did say, firmly and clearly, "Yes. Full report. Video evidence. And I want an internal review launched by morning. They'll have my statement tonight." She hung up and set the phone on the counter. The boy swallowed his last bite of sandwich and whispered, "Are they in trouble?" She turned to him then, and for the first time since that morning, her lips curved into the faintest, most dangerous little smile. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured, walking over to smooth his hair. "They have no idea what kind of trouble they're in." And the boy couldn't help it. He smiled too, because he finally believed her. 3 days later, the same two officers were back. But this time, they didn't come with sirens blaring. They walked slowly up the same cracked sidewalk, hats in their hands, uniforms pressed stiff as if that could somehow erase what had already been done. The boy stood just inside the screen door, peeking through the mesh as his mother opened it and stepped outside to meet them. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then the older officer finally cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he began, his voice low and heavy. "We came to apologize." Her arms folded across her chest, but she didn't stop him. He shifted uncomfortably and continued. "What we did was wrong. We should have asked questions. We should have." "You should have treated him like a human being," she interrupted flatly. Both men flinched. "Yes, ma'am," the younger one said quickly. "You're right. We made assumptions. And we're sorry." She studied them for a long, tense moment. Then she finally nodded. "You should be," she said quietly. And then, to their surprise, she opened the screen door wider. "My son has something to say too," she added. The boy stepped out slowly, his eyes downcast at first. But when he finally looked up, there was something in his gaze neither man had seen before. Strength. He swallowed and said simply, "I hope next time you see a kid like me, you just ask who he is before you decide what he's done." Both officers nodded solemnly, neither daring to look away. The mother placed a hand on her son's shoulder and said, "That's all we wanted. For you to see him. Not what you thought you saw." The older officer opened his mouth as if to say something more, but closed it again. And finally, they turned and walked back to their car, heads bowed. When the door closed behind them, the boy looked up at his mother, who simply smiled faintly and said, "That's how you handle people like that. With dignity." And in that moment, he finally believed it. He didn't feel small anymore. "Now tell me, if you were his mother, standing on that sidewalk, how would you have handled it? Would you have kept quiet? Or spoken up? Drop your answer in the comments below. Someone out there is waiting to hear what you'd do."